Good morning. Welcome to everyone who is joining us for our Fleet Leader chat here this morning. We'll get started in just a minute and let everyone enter our virtual room here. Lots of people filing in. You'll see down at the bottom of your screen, there is a webinar chat button. Feel free to chime in there. Let us know who you are, where you're dialing in from. I'm Tara Beebe. I'm head of marketing here at Idelic. I will start it off and say I'm located in Seattle, Washington this morning. So it's early, dark, and rainy. We'll give it just one more second.
There, what you just described sounds like Pittsburgh, where I'm at. Cold, dark, and rainy.
All right, I'm starting to see a few responses come in of where people are located. Let's go ahead and kick this off. We're a minute past the hour. Again, my name is Tara Beebe. I'm the head of marketing here at Idelic, and we are really excited to be kicking off this new series that we call Idelic Fleet Leader Chats. This is an opportunity for us to bring together our CEO, Nick Bartel, who you hear a lot more with some of our customers and have them, really share what they're hearing in the industry, what's working well in their fleet, what are the technology solutions that are propelling them forward. A couple different things before I hand it over to Nick and Chris. We have a QA and a chat button that you'll see on your screen. You can use both. Ideally, QA comes in through the QA and you chatter away and chat. But if you drop a question in chat, we'll make sure that we catch that also. And we'll have time at the end to answer anything that's on your mind. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce our speakers. Today with us, we have Nick Bartel. He is the CEO and co-founder of Idelic. He'll be leading this session here this morning. And then we also are very honored to have Chris McMahan, Director of Safety, Recruiting, and Retention of Dunavant with us also. So with that, Nick, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll start off by just saying welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And hello to Chris. It's great to see you again. Always a pleasure.
Thanks. It's great to be here and be able to share how we've used Idelic to change our safety culture.
Fantastic. Well, I should share with everyone that Chris is not only just a valued customer of ours and a partner, he is actually a key member of our customer advisory board, which is a group that provides us with really great feedback and insights on how we can make our products and services better so that we can continue to deliver, best-in-class software and solutions for all of you, for our customers. And it also helps us fulfill our own mission of getting drivers safely home each and every night. So, Chris, can't thank you enough for the work you do with us behind the scenes. And I want to thank you again for joining us for the first installment of our Fleet Leader Chats. Last time we spoke, you shared a really, really interesting story about how Dunavant actually first got into trucking, and it didn't start in trucking. So I'd love for you to start off by sharing that story with the group, and then maybe tell us a little bit about how Dunavant operates today.
Okay. Dunavant started out in the cotton business in the 20s and was very successful there. They operated pretty much as a broker. They were the first company to ever export cotton to China. In 2010, the market changed and the cotton became a volatile situation. So we moved into logistics because we were already doing logistics with the cotton. And so they started on a brokerage arm and did import-export, domestic, LTL. And then in 2010, later, they also bought two drayage companies, Dunavant Transgulf Transportation in Houston and Dallas, and Dunavant Sea Line Express on the East Coast. We also delved into the customs clearance as well. We have JM Brining in Mobile, and we also are in warehousing in the Houston market and also doing cross-border now into Mexico.
That's great. So if you could share this, what's the total driver count today?
It's around 300 across the three companies between Sea Lane, Transgulf, and then approximately 6 to 8 trucks we have that operate locally doing the warehousing, shuttling back and forth between our warehouse and the customer.
Got it. So you have your hands full, as they always say. So I always notice that when I talk to people in the industry, it's never really, well, sometimes it is, it's a linear path to how you get into trucking for both businesses and individuals. But sometimes it's kind of a rocky road. It's a hard lefts, U-turns, roundabouts, different ways. My own experience is actually a little bit of all of those. I shared a little bit with you earlier, but I'll share with the group. So my background to get into trucking actually started with my parents. They had a very small recycling and document destruction company here in Pittsburgh. And in summers in high school, I actually drove a box truck. That was my summer job, working for the family business. And my older brother, who was about 4 years older than me, he was my driver manager. And he was responsible for me as well as 30 other drivers. And I knew for a fact he had no idea that I had that box truck going around corners on 2 wheels, trying to get my routes done quickly so I could go spend more time with my friends. So, I know a lot about trucking and driver safety and at-risk drivers because I unfortunately was that at-risk driver, and I knew that I was getting away with it. And sure, there were some citations and definitely some violations and a couple incidents, but never any bad accidents. And I knew I just got lucky. So I knew how big of a problem it was for any driver manager to understand the behavior of those drivers every single day, and then have the tools and systems in place to actually be proactive to coach and train them to be safer. So that's kind of my story of how I got into trucking and trucking safety. I'd love for you to share with the group your own, and specifically how you kind of targeted safety, recruiting, and retention.
Well, actually, I had a full ride to a private university, attended for 3 weeks, decided I was not happy there. So I left school, went to work in a grocery store for about 2 years, and then decided I was going to have to do something that would force me to go back to college. So I applied for a job in a manufacturing facility, knowing that I would not like doing manual labor. And so passed all the tests, was waiting on them to call me. And then they decided to call me and ask me about a dispatch position that was open with a manufacturing company. And that took that position, and here we are 29 years later.
That's fantastic. And how do you like it? Right? Was it the right choice? You feeling like you found your calling?
I honestly don't know what else I would do. And if I'm not going 90-0, I'm bored. So
yeah, I'm the same way. Idle hands, right?
Yes.
So, we all know that a commitment to safety in trucking, that really means a commitment to your drivers. And we here at Idelic, we talk a lot about how drivers should be watched after, not watched over. And, the best approach that we talk about for safety and improvement is, it's not discipline, it is empowerment, right? It's helping those drivers be better, become safer, not just for themselves and their families, but for everyone around the road, right? That's us, that's our families, that's our friends. So it's important to understand that it's not really so much the carrot, or I'm sorry, the stick, but it is the carrot that you want to empower these drivers to help them with their behavior and be a better driver for everyone on those roads. I know that you and your team, you have put in a ton of work and have spent a lot of time creating a very strong safety culture over at Dunavant. So you mentioned to me last time we spoke, that was a really great quote: a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And that can apply to all walks of life, but definitely it applies to building a strong safety culture within a trucking fleet. So why don't you tell us how that all got started and maybe your approach to safety and how you've evolved it over time?
So I began in the safety department in November of 2020. I actually had ran our Memphis terminal, or excuse me, Nashville terminal, with a focus on a Memphis to Nashville lane since 2014. And so when the safety position became available, I already knew the culture, I already knew the rules. And so it was an easy switch for me to do something different, and also take my skills and I've polished over the years and begin working on something different to help the company move forward. When I moved into the role, I basically learned how things work from the inside, because I had been in the company, but I was seeing it from a different perspective. So instead of trying to come in and change things right away, for the first year, I just followed what we were already doing and tried to learn everything as it was, and then assess at a year point that what was working, what wasn't, how we could improve. Our scores, CSA scores improved during that time frame, just because we, instead of trying to change, we just went with the flow, and we saw changes, and then we implemented some small things. And like during COVID, we had to do video trainings versus being able to go and have meetings because we couldn't bring large groups together because the fear of people getting COVID and then shutting down our operations. So, and then we also had processes we put in place to try to curtail our safety, our vehicle maintenance scores, and our hours of service as well. One of the biggest struggles that we found, though, was that we were operating in about 16 different systems, and having that data combined was taking people hours daily to manipulate and correlate and create reporting where we could judge ourselves or critique where we were, try to find our pain points. So that's when we began looking at systems such as Idelic to try to marry all of that data together to where we would have one operating system that we could actually see everything.
Yeah, so that is a challenge I think that almost every fleet out there faces. And the adoption of new technology is never easy. You have to evaluate it, you have to understand the cost, you have to understand the ROI and the benefits. Then you have to get buy-in, because it's not just a, hey, let's do this new thing and everyone buys in and jumps on and it's this great happy story. There are always challenges because there's a human element involved. So I'd love to hear about, as you evaluate technologies now, as you have evaluated and implemented technologies at Dunavant, what's your process to really understand the use case as well as internally getting the buy-in so that when, whatever the technology is starts to get implemented, people understand the value, the use of it, and you have everyone rowing in the same direction?
That's not always an easy task. And that goes back to that quote you made earlier that I had referenced when we had our call earlier in the week. It's a culture shift. Being able to see things that existed, and then when you can kind of push them under the rug and act like they don't exist until you have that data right in front of you. As far as technology, one of the things that I've seen since starting in this role is that lots of companies will promise you lots of things to get you your buy-in, but then if you don't do the diligence of checking them out before you actually sign that contract and make sure you're getting what you were promised, you end up in a situation where you're still going to have workarounds, which is something that we really don't want. I mean, time is money. So the less time we spend critiquing data that we have to manipulate, extract, Excel spreadsheets, Power BI, all those different things, it's a lot easier if the data is right in front of you.
And to get that data, obviously there are terabytes and terabytes of data coming off of each truck. And then you have every driver that has data and systems related to them. It's telematics, FMCSA, cameras, hours of service, mileage, training, just driver hours. List goes on and on and on. With the average fleet having over 8 different systems tracking specifically driver data and behavior, as you've adopted, how do you really explain to maybe upper management or team members that, hey, this is the new way that we should do things because we want to be the best, we want to continue to adopt new technology that's changing the game. And always there's who moved by cheese, there's the way that we're doing it right now is fine, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and then the one that I love is old habits die hard, especially if they're bad habits. How have you really navigated that landscape internally to make sure that you are always forward facing and paying attention to the best and the greatest technologies out there?
Honestly, I'm very not easy for change to deal with change myself, but I actually we had a safety meeting a couple of weeks ago, and part of that discussion was how do I get people's buy-in? How do we get the driver's buy-in, the staff's buy-in? And I attended a class called Team Trek, which is a leadership building company out in Arkansas. And I actually used part of what I learned there. One of the statements that they make there is people don't care what you know until they know you care. So you have to show you care. I'm all about building relationships with people. But sometimes when you're in that busy state of mind, you don't always think about interacting with people in a different way, or getting on someone's level and speaking to them in ways that make them want to be better or do better. So part of what I did was we talked about when we see something good, we say it. And our meeting went really well because it engaged everyone. Everyone was excited to learn. I think we had Idelic since July and people had access, but I don't think they fully grasped what it was able to do, like other softwares that we have as well. I will tell you that we have the best management team that I've ever worked with, and they're game for doing anything that makes us better. And at the end of the day, we're all one Dunavant, even though we operate under several different company names, and we all have one goal, and that's to ensure that we're successful. And in order to be successful, we have to be successful individually in order to be successful as a team. So we have to help those that are struggling inside of our team to gain better knowledge and understanding of where they are and where their terminal may be or their organization may be in order for us to all move forward.
Yeah, that's a really great point. We have a fantastic executive team here as well. I feel the same sentiment that you just shared. We always say we are one team. We've changed our values over the past several years as our business has evolved, but the one core value that we've never changed this entire time has been one team, because we truly see ourselves as one team. We win together, we also lose together. And I know that applies not only to us, but the entire industry, our entire industry of transportation and trucking, because there's always a stigma about the big bad truck that's driving down the road that wants to run into everyone. And the worst thing that we could see is a tractor trailer turned over on its side down in a ditch, because that hurts us all. So we always say no one competes on safety. This is an entire one team effort within trucking to make sure our drivers are as safe as they can be. And the best way to do that is to understand how they are measured, right? How do we understand their risk? You mentioned, right, what we do for you. We gather your data, put it in one place, identify the risk, and then give you the workflows and the performance development plans so you can do targeted proactive action to help prevent those accidents from happening. But you have to have targets, right? You have to have goals. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear and for the group to know about, what are the goals and targets that you at Dunavant have really strived for when it comes to driver safety as well as risk reduction?
I think getting the driver's buy-in has been a big thing. Not feeling like that we're monitoring everything they do and we're basically telling them how to drive the truck from our offices in different cities. One of the things that I do in that regard is you have to get to know the driver. In order to build that relationship, you need to learn about their family. You need to learn about what they like to do, what drives them. We also talk about, our job and focus as a safety department is to make sure you get home to your family every day. You're out here to make money, and you can kind of get in a hurry at times to try to make more money or speed up because you've got something you've got to do after work or whatever. But the ultimate goal is to get home, and you have to prioritize safety in order to make that happen. So when we're coaching, it's not that we're giving you a hard time or we're sitting here trying to tell you what to do from a perspective of watching from a screen. We care. And that's how you get the driver's buy-in. From a perspective of what we're doing and what we're focused on, vehicle maintenance is always an issue, especially as it pertains to the intermodal industry, because we're operating and pulling equipment that does not belong to us. And as a company, we're a non-asset-based company, so we're about 90% owner-operator. And so also managing those units because they don't belong to us as well. So what we're doing is putting different things into place to make sure that the safety and the vehicle maintenance is being handled on those units, which will in turn lower CSA scores, which will in turn allow customers to view those scores, to critique whether they feel comfortable doing business with you or not based off how well you're doing from a safety perspective. It all trickles down, and safety's at the top. Safety's not a revenue generator, but they kind of are in a way that we manage and make sure that the money that comes in the door doesn't go out the door in litigation or accident claims and that type of thing.
Yeah, that's great, and that makes a ton of sense. You know, the core objective of any business is to keep their employees safe, right? If you're not doing that, there's something wrong. And within trucking, it just gets exponentially more important. You mentioned, you know, you've been with us for over a year, live on the system since summertime. When we last spoke, you talked about the reasons of why you came over to the Safety Suite platform. First and foremost, you want to put your data in one place and get rid of those disparate systems and siloed databases so you can see everything together. Second, you mentioned, you know, proactively coaching drivers, increasing the visibility of the risky behavior that could result into an accident and getting out in front of that. And then third, you know, providing your managers with tools like our PDPs, the professional development plans, to improve the quality of the coaching conversations and really the outreach to those drivers to do exactly what you just said. Show them that you care. You're watching after them, not over them. You want them to be better. So I'd love for you to talk about very candidly, you know, how's it been going? How is your team using our platform? What successes are you seeing? And kind of what lessons or aha moments have you had along the way?
I think we're finally getting fully engaged with it, not just being safety using the system. And they're actually logging in and seeing their data and questioning things now. From my perspective, one of the things that I did from the get-go was I got into the system even before we had data in there and started playing around and learning it. I basically self-taught myself the system, which one of our rep Angela was very excited about. So generally I was asking her questions. She's like, we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. So,
we love Angela.
But it was a great experience from the startup through go live, and then the data and being able to see the data and from one screen and separated by company. And one of the things that the owner of the company asked for was a way to score our drivers to see where are our risks. And that was from a terminal perspective, even more granular into the driver's perspective. And then we can be laser focused on what we need to do to change that risk in those areas. So we know where we have issues with hours of service. We know where we would have issues with vehicle maintenance, speeding. You know, before it was very hard to grasp that data because it would take, I mean, the reporting we were doing manually would take about 4.5 hours to create every Monday morning.
Wow.
So it's been great. I think your team's done a great job of walking us through the process, getting us to that go live date. And they respond quickly when I have a question or I have a suggestion or I ask, you know, why does this way or that way? They very quickly respond and usually have an answer to me within hours. So having a partner who is proactive and instead of reactive has been a great asset.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that sentiment. I will share that with the team without a doubt. I know they would love that. You know, the culture that we've been talking about, adopting new technology, making sure the drivers know they're being cared about. Have you noticed an impact change? Obviously, you've built this culture and added technology for the drivers themselves, right? A lot of times we'll hear, well, our drivers are not going to like this. They're going to shun this. They're going to say, hey, you're being big brother, or hey, this isn't how I want to operate. But you, as obviously the safety managers and directors, need to be the ones out on the front line saying, no, that's not how it is. This is a tool. This is to help. And I think that's really important for every fleet to strive for, especially in the current environment we're at and where we've been when it comes to driver retention and the turnover involved, because that could be $8, $9, $10, $12,000 per driver when you have a driver leave. So you want them to be there. You want them to embrace the culture. How has Idelic helped you with that impact of making sure the drivers know exactly what you just said, right? We're watching, but it's for a reason, because we care.
I will say that in the beginning, it was a little rough, just calling and having the conversations with them, and a lot of that back and forth of, oh, I've been driving for 30 years. Well, insurance industry standards say that drivers with 0 to 24 months of experience and drivers with 5 years plus experience are your biggest risks, because the new guys don't know things, so they're not going to know, and things are going to happen. And then you have the guys who've been driving forever who think they're immune to anything, and they've been doing this for 38 years, 40 years, and never had an accident. But they have to realize that they're a business as well. I mean, they're a business partner of ours, so not only are events that they create or accidents they have going to affect us, but it also affects them, because companies look at your PSP scores, they look at your MVRs. One of the biggest things that drivers today question is, if you see something on their MVR and you say, what's this? And they're like, that's in my personal vehicle. On an MVR, it doesn't matter if it's your personal vehicle or that truck, it's all the same. You have one driver's license. So whatever you do in your car affects whatever you do in that truck. I think teaching people, I'm all about the big picture and learning everything so that I understand fully. And I think my focus has shifted to a point of, we're going to train people so that they know. I want you to understand the big picture, how everything affects us and what we do affects you. And I think that will help, especially from a driver's perspective.
Yeah, I always have the saying that every plant needs watered differently. Some like sun, some don't. Some need water, some don't. Some like to be in the closet, away in the dark, not talking to anyone, and only really approached if someone needs something from them. And it's a challenge. It really is. There's personalities. There's also, you mentioned the tenure, right? People who say, look, I've been doing this for years. I know what I'm doing. And then it's obviously the challenge of the safety team to say, I understand, but the data is saying something differently. And I know that, a lot of decisions that are made strategically and tactically in any business revolve around data and data-driven decisions. How has Idelic helped you with those data-driven decisions now that you have all of that data together?
It's proven that some of our assumptions were true, and some of them weren't. You can determine, drivers will say, most of your violations are on a chassis that belong to the chassis providers. When in actuality, if you look at trends, you see that most of the violations occur on your trucks. Being able to prove that to a driver versus just having an argumentative discussion about it because you don't have the data in front of you. Same thing with the telematics. If you can prove to a driver, look, you were too close to that vehicle in front of you by a video, it's very different when you have the facts in front of you versus just trying to prove your point without those facts.
Yeah, we always say, the data doesn't lie. However, caveat there, it can be interpreted incorrectly. And I think that's a challenge with anyone that has a lot of data, especially within our industry. And we do our best at Idelic to make sure those insights are clear, they're clean, and most importantly, they're actionable, because it's one thing to have the risk identified and see what needs to happen, but the most important part is actually doing something, taking that action to get the results and the improvement that you want, and frankly, that you need. Backing out a little bit, we look at what's happening in the world. We are obviously in the middle of a continued economic downturn with lots of uncertainty and headwinds ahead for everyone. I know that this year especially will continue to be a challenge for many companies and many industries. What's your perspective on where we are as an industry in 2023 with what's happening in the macro economy, and what do you think fleets can do to not only survive but thrive in these conditions, not just today but in the years to come?
And engage their drivers, engage their staff, train. We're in a situation where we have a driver shortage. We also, the freight's fluctuating. So you want to keep the drivers you have and not have them jump ship because freight fluctuations. Well, building relationships with those drivers is key. I'm all about, I think the reason I've been so successful in my career is that I value relationships. I contact those people and speak to them on their level. And it's just not, I'm calling you about business. I'm calling you about what's going on with you. I mean, I have relationships with drivers that I talked to 30 years ago that I still communicate with today that don't even work with me.
Yeah,
so
that's great. The flip side of that coin, and it's actually a question that I see here, which I'll dive into now. What is your approach when counseling a combative driver? Because we know not everyone gets it, not everyone's on board, not everyone buys in, and there are those that are still valuable. We want to make sure they stay at our fleets, but it's a challenge to have them see the light and understand. And a lot of times, the first reaction is from a defensive position, and it's our jobs and safety managers' jobs to break down those barriers and those walls and have that, one-to-one human interaction. How do you do that personally? Because everyone has their own style.
I try to get on their level. I actually had a situation, I discussed this yesterday. I had a guy yesterday who made a comment that he had been driving 38 years and he just didn't understand why he needed to do this. He'd not been involved in an accident. It's like, okay, let's watch some video, show the data, and then talk about, the goal here is to get you home to your family. I mean, yeah, we want you to make money. We want to partner with you. But at the end of the day, I've got to make sure you get home. And if you don't get home, that's going to affect me in more than one way. And they're going to see it from a financial perspective, but I see it from a relationship perspective. I don't want to be the person who has to tell someone their family member's not going to make it home.
Yeah.
So that's why I encourage drivers' wives to come to safety meetings, because they will reiterate everything you say. And usually if the wife is involved, then she's gonna, actually had a driver, I'll tell a story. So one time I had a driver tell me he didn't want to do a load. And I'm like, okay, well, what about this one? I don't want to do that one either. And he was speaking in Spanish, but he was fluent in English. And so I said, okay, do I need to call Charlotte? And he goes, never mind, give it here. It's all about building relationships, leveraging.
Yeah, emotional intelligence, right? It's been around for a long time, but you have to be on someone's level. You have to interact with them how they, need to be interacted with to get the message across. What about, actually, there's a question here just popped up. This is related to your team. So people are interested, you have your driver count. You mentioned 300 drivers across 3 different companies. I think the question here is, what does your team look like to manage those drivers, probably safety and operations?
So I actually have safety recruiting and retention. So I have 4 safety members and then a manager. So I have a safety team of 5 people. I also have a regional safety manager who handles most of the coaching, who's based in Nashville. And then I have a retention manager who also can maneuver between because he's done both. And then I have 4 recruiters and a recruiting manager, but we all work as one team. So cross training is key to any successful team.
Got it. Yeah, it's so interesting. We have fleets of all sizes, right? 50 to multiple thousands of drivers. And what we found particularly interesting is you could have a fleet 200 drivers on the right-hand side of the road. They operate. A fleet 200 drivers on the left-hand side of the road. They operate. They haul the same things, run the same routes. But internally, their structure is completely different. They could have 2 driver managers, or 1 or 10. You could have the CEO or the president driving as well, just because he drove his whole life and he likes to drive. Or you could have a formal corporate structure with a board of directors and advisory boards. So there really is no one size fits all that we're learning about. It's really about understanding who you have, the capacity of your team, and then doing what our customers do really well is finding the technologies that help them be the most efficient and effective with the resources that they have. And it's always fascinating to me to learn about the internal structures of those teams, because you'll understand that as we service our clients, we have our own challenges, right? Of how do we get them to understand and adopt, just like you would for a driver as a driver manager. And there really isn't one size fits all, but it's about the commitment, right? It's if you really want the results, you have to implement and adopt the tools, and you have to have your team do that as one team, as we mentioned. But you'll get there. It just takes some time sometimes. So one question just popped up here about vehicle maintenance. You mentioned you use the system for vehicle maintenance. Other than monitoring CSA and basics, how are you using the system to help with that?
So basically, we can see where our violations are occurring in what cities and what states, and we're able to determine where we need to focus more on training on those types of situations. We also, one of the things that we put in place with our vehicle maintenance is, or with our CSA as it pertains to vehicle maintenance is, if a driver receives a roadside inspection with violations, we require that driver to get the repairs done, provide the receipts, and then also they go to an outside vendor to do a truck inspection that is returned to us before that truck's put back in service. Doing that puts some skin in the game with the owner operator or the DFOs, because now you've got to go get your truck inspected to ensure it's roadworthy. We're also doing PDP plans on vehicle maintenance. So if we see drivers with continual vehicle maintenance issues, we're handling it that way. One of the things that I do from a perspective of looking at a PSP on a driver when we're hiring them is, if you've got vehicle maintenance violations, is this the truck you're bringing to me that you want to lease to me that you got these violations in? Because if it is, I'm not interested, or I'm going to be less interested unless you're going to sign something or agree to continue to keep the maintenance up on that unit if we were to lease you on. Or it might have been a situation where he was a DFO for an owner and the owner wouldn't keep up the maintenance. So he's got his own truck now because he didn't want to deal with that.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. And we've seen several fleets do it different ways, but the most important thing, as you mentioned, is having the data to say, here's what it is, here's what it needs to be, and then you can act on it. One question we have here is kind of similar to that when you talk about performance development plans and the driver's behavior and the improvement. The question is, has Idelic so far for Dunavant been a one-stop shop to determine any kind of performance-based bonuses related to safety?
We have not used it in that manner yet. This year we will be using it. There were certain criteria that were put in place for the bonus program before. We actually have a driver of the month in each terminal, and then we have a driver of the quarter and a driver of the year. And then in one of our locations, we have 2 that are runner-up and second runner-up, first and second runner-up. So in order to make driver of the year, you have to be a driver of the month and quarter. And you have to, one of the things that we're doing is if a driver has a risk score, watch list score of less than a 40, there are certain things that you gain from that. You don't have to watch a video every month or video training every month. You do have to watch one a quarter, because part of this is we don't necessarily, one of the things we gain with Idelic is the ability to see who's performing well, and we can give them kudos and allow them some reprieve in things that we're doing. But we also able to manage the ones who are risk. So while we're going to be less restrictive on some drivers who are doing better, we're going to be more restrictive on the other drivers who aren't performing as well.
Yeah, that's great using the scores for that. I think that's a really smart way to utilize that data, because it is able to be improved, and the performance is pretty clear when you look at the systems to say, are they doing what we ask of them? And that kind of relates to the next question here on professional development plans. You mentioned just starting to get into those. Do you have any early success stories or reactions that you can share?
I think one of the things that we've seen is that sometimes we see that they're just checking a box and doing the PDP plan, but their behavior is not changing. So, and that's kind of what we discussed on our call yesterday. So I think going in having the mindset of, yes, you're going to do these videos and you're going to improve your behavior over a 4-week period, 6-week period, but that behavior's got to continue. So being able to track how many times a driver's been on a PDP plan for the same period over a period of time. So if he's gone through 3 in a 24-month period, he's obviously not changing his behavior. He might be changing it for a period of time to get the heat off and then going back into that. So then you've got this up and down. I'm doing well, I'm doing bad, I'm doing well, I'm doing bad. So how do we manage that?
Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead.
The performance model that we discussed yesterday, whereas you're gaining points versus losing points, and instead of losing a large number of points, which then puts you under watch list, you keep that score higher by only removing a few points for doing the PDP plan, but then you have to reduce it over time to show your continuous improvement, is a better solution in my mind for all companies.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. It's continuous engagement, continuous improvement. It can't just be a, hey, I got talked to once, I'm going to put my head down, keep it low, and they're going to forget about me. It needs to be something that is implemented so that, whack-a-mole is a game that gets played every single day by safety managers. And, sometimes drivers are the moles, sometimes the equipment are the moles, sometimes the clients, customers, they're the moles. But there's always something that needs to be addressed. And I think in the days of old, the adage was, from a driver's perspective, okay, if my head jumps up and I get hit down, I'll take my licking, but then they're going to forget about me and I can go on and do whatever I have to do. Nothing that I was told to do or trained on needs to stick, because they have other problems to worry about. And the game has completely changed in a really positive way to say, as the employees of the company and as peers, and also as the front line, as drivers, we expect the best performance. It's really a reflection of our brand, our company, who we are, our culture. And absolutely, it helps us with our business, right? A really strong brand with driver retention and safety, that helps top line revenue with clients and customers. So it's really important to have the drivers understand, just as you had described, that I'm not just going to talk to you now. This isn't a slap on the wrist. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to be holding your hand, and we're going to walk through this together to make sure this is a long-term improvement, because that's what we expect out of everyone at our company. So I think that's a really great approach.
Yeah, and I think so one of the things that I've noticed is when we go out to visit terminals and we're introduced to people and you recognize their name, it kind of shocks them because you're so withdrawn. You're in another city. They may talk to you on the phone once in a 6-month period, but knowing that person and knowing certain things about that person, it goes a long way in developing that relationship once you're face to face.
Absolutely. Well, we are at time. So I'll wrap up by just saying, on behalf of the entire team here at Idelic, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Chris, so much for joining us and for your continued leadership and commitment to improving safety within our industry, and for putting your trust in us and your trust from Dunavant to be your vendor and your partner within driving safety. So I look forward to continuing our partnership for many, many years to come. Any last comments you'd like to make?
Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Again, thank you all for joining us. And as always, please stay safe.